It's fun. It's like, come on down. I feel like I feel like it's The Price is Right. So. But I can't thank the three of you enough for being in this dialogue and presenting these kind of different facets of a kind of central question. And one of the questions I guess I wanted to ask, hearing all of you, is to maybe ask each of you to reflect a little bit on what the designation of something as art lets you do that maybe you weren't otherwise able to do. I mean, Gina, you talked a lot about how even in all of these like very nuts and bolts projects, it's important to emphasize art. At the same time that you provided a kind of balance of you can't just beautify something. And so I see all of you kind of looking, engaging in, thinking through projects that are kind of bouncing between, you know, these two possibilities. And Sita, when you talked about the just all the uptake, everyone's agreement that we want to do the walk. Well, the walk is like, right, it's one of the pilgrimage, the procession, one of the oldest forms of art making, and everyone bought into it, even though, like, what's the tangible, you know, impact? Who's it for? So I just wonder if maybe you could say a few things about either what art permits, or even, you know, Patricia, you were saying the problem of, you know, you get caught in nomenclatures. Is it art? Is it not art? If it's landscape architecture, does it just become a consumer function of a pretty plaza? You know, these words really mean something and help us do, or kind of straitjacket us in sometimes.
I can go first if you want.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So, yeah, something that I didn't bring up in my talk and I wanted to is the role, you know, that role of education. I mean, that's what the panel's about. And I think for a lot of artists early on, I mean, I think what we saw was people were not connecting the dots between interdependence. And so it's kind of like learning how a computer works. You know, it's conceptual, it takes time to really grasp. And these artists like Bonnie, any of these kind of eco-art, ecological artists, whatever you want to call them, did use education and working with children to raise consciousness. And so, you know, in my opinion, if an artist says it's art, then it's art. I don't question it. And, you know, yeah, the strategies that artists can use and where they use them, it doesn't have to be in an art context. So I don't really worry about that too much. You know, if the artist says it's art, it's art. But yeah, the role of education in art, learning in art. I mean, I think museums take that very seriously, that they're educational institutions. So why can't the artists themselves be the educator?
For myself, prior to Bonnie, honestly, as a gardener, I was very linear. Everything was straight lines, and I never really thought about art. I consider myself an artist. I do love to draw, and I never really connected it. But Bonnie is really very straightforward. In every conversation, stop doing the lines. Create a circle, create an arch, create this, a triangle. And I'm like, Bonnie, but we can't, I'm feeding 100 kids. A triangle is gonna be difficult for 100 kids to walk in and out. And she'd go, China, open your mind. And I'm grateful for that, because what she did and what happened to me, it was sort of like a mind explosion. You know, I feel that with that acceptance and understanding that it can be artistic, that the world just opens up. And today when I was speaking to the young people, I said exactly that. They're here gardening, but this is an art form. And how you place these plants and the colors that you choose, it is art. There were people walking by who were walking their dogs or just walking, and they all stopped to see what these kids were planting. And in spring, the colors are gonna pop, and everyone's gonna marvel. So to me, it's all art, if you say it's art.
I would, I've written about how art is the sum of everyone who has ever called something art. The sum of all of those ideas is art. And within that umbrella, I'm also talking about something more specific to myself, for myself. One of my mentors, Jacqueline Francis, told me once that art is a place for things that don't fit anywhere else. And it's not to say that it's kind of a garbage can. I think she would actually push against it, you know, but to say that, you know, I think as People's Kitchen Collective, it's interesting for you to talk about, to hear you talk about the professionalization of certain kinds of art making. We are an LLC, you know, we have a physical sponsor, you know, all of that is kind of practical stuff. And part of what has helped shape the Earthseed project was us asking, okay, how is this different from a pop-up? How is this different from a pilgrimage? How is this different from, you know, that? And to kind of see like, okay, what is it that art can afford us? And I think for me, and many would argue with this, it is about the metaphor, which is about poetry. You know, it's about, and I don't, it's trickiness in there, but I am really interested in setting the stage for things to happen. And for us to imagine that that stage then relates to like a bunch of other stuff that's going on in the world, like climate change or like, you know, housing. Yeah.
Just in the interest of time and not just hearing my own voice, if there are folks in the audience who want to you know, have a question for the panel, please raise a hand or shout out and go ahead.
Is that a question for Sita? Is it Sita? Is that how you say it? I missed the beginning of your talk because I was talking to Chia. But I wanted to know, first of all, how do I find the book? When is it coming out? Book?
So the question for Sita is about the Constellations book and when is it coming out?
There was a pandemic, I had a baby, it's a little late. It'll be out next year. Yeah, so we're editing it right now. Yeah, thank you.
I wanted to know how did all this begin for you? Because it's such a wonderful insight into art and how you came to art through food. Right? Yes?
So this is Sita's origin story.
Thank you for that question. Let me think. I see food as a lens to understand the world. One of the exercises I would have my students do in a class that I taught called The Taste of Resistance, I would have them lay out, write on a sheet of paper in groups, every issue they could think of at this moment in time globally that mattered, and then to circle all of the issues that had to do with food, and then connect the dots. And then, of course, the last exercise before they left class was, okay, then tell me about how internet security has to do with our food system. Okay, then tell me about how reproductive rights has to do with our food system. And there was always a connection. And so I think that, you know, for me and also for People's Kitchen Collective, it's like, it's a window. It's something that I was interested in. Honestly, I went to grad school at CCA. I was so stressed out. I was like working this corporate job, whatever, and I was like, in order for me to be somewhat satisfying for me to go to grad school, I'm just gonna work with food for a while because I know even at least if I have a bad day at the end of it, I have a meal and then, you know, at least I get that sense of satisfaction out of it. But it was a way to also think about migration and history and memory and all of that. And, you know, my obsession, I tell this to my students too, it's like just whatever you're obsessed with, let yourself be obsessed with it. It'll take you it'll take you somewhere interesting. So that's how I kind of came to this. I mean, I veered a bit, I think, off from food right now and what I'm working on, but it's, yeah, it's always in there.
I'd like to say something real quick. Yeah, indigenous perspective is there. I mean, they don't have a word for art, kind of like the Balinese, you know, there is no name for art. And I'm enjoying that more and more. I like that, in fact, that the art and ecology, eco-art, ecological art movement has never settled on a name. It's constantly evolving, and I think it's best if we don't try and put it in a box and let it, yeah, evolve. And maybe that's the ultimate, is that all these things that we're doing that are called art become just how we live our life. And yeah.
Go ahead.
Bonnie was so ahead of her time, and we see things like percolates or tearing up, returning concrete to its natural environment being solutions today. So I'm just wondering if in these archives there are more solutions or ideas that we should be tapping into right now.
There are. Hi, Robin. Robin is she's a funder. So the CCG, we're working on a community challenge grant, and we're grateful for Robin and all of her support. But yes, there is. The archives, Frank can tell you, and they've gone through it. Bonnie has created so much. She didn't sleep. She's broken up, she's created designs for places and areas in San Francisco that are not touched. She had this forethought. So yes, there's lots of ideas there.
And Sheena, if I could just ask the last thing, and then I want to let us all grab a bite, is just you talking about kind of food justice as the next step for maybe where you could be steering a living library. Is there anything else you want to add to?
Yeah, food justice, we work in a lot of communities and it's sad to say, these kids don't really realize they live in a food desert. Right by the Denman, San Miguel Leadership and Balboa area, they opened up a cannabis shop there. Could you believe that? I mean, that's something very difficult to do in some zip codes. But for there, even though we all protested and we all got together, it opened. And so this whole thing with food justice is that, we're dealing with obesity, the high sugar in lots of these communities. So it's really important to teach these kids how to eat properly. And when you have a great meal, your mind expands. It's a muscle. You feed your mind. And then things happen. And it's just so food justice is something that, like Jose, he's the one who works with the interns. He grew up in the San Francisco area. And he grew up without money. So he understands the importance of providing these kids and letting these kids know what's just around them. So yes, that's the movement we're working toward.
And Sita, I love you had in one of your slides, farm to kitchen to table to the streets, it's part of an important sequence of action.
Yeah, that was very much Saqib Kaval's framework that he brought into the collective we talk about food apartheid, in people's kitchen. I mean, not just us. Like, this is not a concept that we came up with. But we look at it because it is. It's not an accident. It's not an accident. How and where and why access has been cut off, or access also to land. The person Janaki Yanaga, who's texted me this morning, talking about like the Ora Sherk punk garden spirit, feminine punk garden spirit. She's a water rights activist, founder of the Marigold Society, and also a farmer. And that, thinking of food, just realizing how this is part of systems is so much of what I've learned from her in agroecology, that this is not an accident, and that, that there were more farmers of color than there are now, that had, that this, and I think that maybe that's something, perhaps this is also why, systems is interesting to me creatively, because I see all these issues as systemic. And so, how do we as artists then respond?
I'm going to have to leave it there unless you've got a last.
Can I just add one thing? I'm glad you raised that, because we all know Central Park, even if we haven't visited New York, one of the largest, most beautiful parks in America. Central Park was a place where black farmers resided. Okay? So I agree with her.
And we're going to continue with ideas of, this is kind of Bonnie's idea of the life frame that you're all bringing up, and we're going to continue that. We'll take a quick break. We are running a little behind. Let's come back at 2:20 for our next panel. Thank you.